You've seen people act entitled in public, but what happened on Flight 402 out of Chicago wasn't just a tantrum. It was a career-ending mistake. Beatrice Callaway, a wealthy executive who thought she owned the world, refused to give up the first-class seat she stole from a young black girl named Naya. She screamed, she insulted, and she thought she had won. But she didn't know that Naya was holding a phone, and with just one call, she didn't just ground the plane, she froze the entire airport. When the doors finally opened, it wasn't the police coming for the girl. It was karma coming for Beatrice. And it hit hard. You won't believe who was on the other end of that line. The recycled air inside O'Hare International Airport was stifling, a mix of nervous sweat, expensive coffee, and the dull roar of thousands of travelers rushing to their gates. It was a Tuesday afternoon, usually a lull period for business travel, but Flight 402 to Atlanta was fully booked. Nia James stood near the gate, clutching her boarding pass so tightly the edges were starting to curl. At 19 years old, wearing a simple oversized hoodie, faded jeans and scuffed sneakers, she didn't look like the typical clientele for Group 1 boarding. She looked like a college student on her way back to dorms, or perhaps someone visiting family. She kept her head down, her noise-cancelling headphones resting around her neck, trying to make herself as invisible as possible. But invisibility was hard when you were about to walk into the lion's den. Group 1, First Class and Diamond Medallion members, you are welcome to board, the gate agent announced, her voice crackling over the intercom. Nia took a deep breath. She stepped forward. Immediately she felt the eyes. A man in a sharp grey suit scoffed audibly behind her, checking his Rolex as if her presence was delaying his very important schedule. A woman with a Louis Vuitton carry-on nudged her husband, whispering something that ended with a judgmental giggle. Nia ignored them. She scanned her ticket. The machine beeped green. Priority. She walked down the jet bridge, the sound of her sneakers squeaking against the metal floor. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not really. She wasn't rich. She wasn't famous. But her scholarship program, funded by the Sterling Foundation, included travel expenses for the annual gala in Atlanta. They had booked the ticket. They had insisted on the upgrade. "You've worked too hard, Nia," her mentor had said. "Enjoy the legroom." She stepped onto the plane, greeted by the flight attendant, a kind-faced woman named Sarah. "Welcome aboard," Sarah smiled, checking Nia's stub. "Seat 2A, right up here on your left, window side." "Thank you," Nia whispered. She moved into the first-class cabin. It was cool, smelling faintly of leather and sanitizing wipes. But as she approached row 2, she stopped cold. There was already someone in seat 2A. A woman sat there, settled in as if she had been born in that chair. She looked to be in her late 40s, with a stiff blonde bob that didn't move when she turned her head. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Nia's entire tuition for the semester. She was sipping a pre-flight mimosa, flipping through a magazine with aggressive snaps of the wrist. This was Beatrice Callaway. Nia checked her ticket again. 2A. Definitely 2A. "Excuse me," Nia said softly. Beatrice didn't look up. She turned a page. "Mum?" Nia tried again, slightly louder. Beatrice finally acknowledged her existence, but only by lowering her sunglasses to the bridge of her nose. Her eyes were ice blue and filled with instant disdain. She scanned Nia from her messy bun down to her sneakers, her lip curling in a sneer. "Service class is back there, honey," Beatrice said, waving her hand toward the economy section without making eye contact. "You're blocking the aisle." Nia felt the heat rise in her cheeks. "I know where economy is. But you're in my seat. I have 2A. She held out her boarding pass. Beatrice laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Don't be ridiculous. This is first class," They don't put people like you in seats like this. Check your ticket again. It probably says 22A, not 2A. It says 2A, Naya insisted, her voice trembling slightly but holding firm. Please check. I don't need to check anything, Beatrice snapped, finally closing her magazine. I am a platinum member with this airline. I have flown this route every Tuesday for 6 years. I sit in 2A. Now go find your seat in the back before I call the attendant to have you removed for harassment. The other passengers in first class were watching now. A businessman in 1B was pretending to look at his phone, but was clearly recording. An older couple in row 3 looked horrified, but said nothing. Nia wasn't confrontational. She hated conflict, but she knew she was right. I'm not harassing you, Nia said. I'm just asking for the seat I paid for. You didn't pay for this, Beatrice spat, her voice raising an octave. Did you use a stolen credit card? Is that it? Or is this some kind of diversity quota upgrade? Listen to me, little girl. I paid $4,000 for this flight. I am not moving for someone who looks like they're about to ask me for spare change. The insult hung in the air, thick and ugly. At that moment, Sarah, the flight attendant, hurried over. She had sensed the tension from the galley. Is there a problem here? Sarah asked, her professional smile straining at the edges. Yes, Beatrice declared, pointing a manicured finger at Nia. This child is confused. She thinks she's sitting here. Please escort her to the back so I can finish my drink in peace. Sarah turned to Naya. May I see your boarding pass, miss? Naya handed it over silently. Sarah scanned it, then checked her manifest on the tablet she was holding. She frowned, tapped the screen, and checked it again. She looked up at Naya, then at Beatrice. Miss Callaway, Sarah said, her voice polite but firm. I'm afraid there has been a mistake on your part. This is Nia James's seat. Your seat is 4B. The cabin went silent. Beatrice's face turned a shade of red that clashed with her sweater. Excuse me? You are in 4B, Sarah repeated. It's an aisle seat in the last row of first class. You need to move so Miss James can take her assigned seat. Beatrice didn't move. She didn't blink. She stared at Sarah with the intensity of a predator looking at prey. I am not moving, Beatrice said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I don't care what your little computer says. I sat here first, and I am certainly not moving for her. The air in the cabin shifted from awkward to volatile. The plane was still at the gate, the boarding door open, but the atmosphere felt like a pressurized canister ready to burst. Miss Callaway, Sarah said, her patience thinning. I understand it's frustrating, but seat assignments are specific. Miss James has the ticket for 2A. Beatrice slammed her magazine down on the tray table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Do you know who I am? It was the cliché line of every entitled passenger, but Beatrice said it with such conviction that even the man in 1B flinched. I am the regional director for Callaway and Finch Logistics, Beatrice announced. We ship millions of dollars of cargo with this airline every year. My company practically keeps this route in business. If I say I am sitting in 2A, then I am sitting in 2A. If you have a problem with the seating chart, move her. She gestured dismissively at Nia. Put her in 4B, or better yet, put her in coach where she belongs. I'm sure she'd feel more comfortable with her own kind. A gasp rippled through the cabin. The racism wasn't subtle anymore. It was out in the open, naked and ugly. Naya's hands were shaking. She wasn't shaking from fear, though. She was shaking from rage. She had spent her whole life dealing with microaggressions, with people clutching their purses when she walked by, with teachers assuming she didn't do her own homework. But this was different. That is enough, Sarah said, her voice hardening. Ma'am, that kind of language is not tolerated on this airline. I am going to ask you one last time to retrieve your items and move to your assigned seat, or you will be escorted off this plane. Beatrice laughed again. You wouldn't dare. You touch me, and I'll sue this airline into bankruptcy. I'll have your job by tomorrow morning. Do you hear me? I want to speak to the pilot. Get the captain out here, now! Sarah pressed the call button for the cockpit. While they waited, Beatrice turned her venom back to Nia. Nia was still standing in the aisle, clutching her backpack strap. You should be ashamed of yourself, Beatrice hissed. Making a scene like this, disrupting hard-working people. You probably think this is funny, don't you? Some kind of TikTok prank? You're delaying the flight. You're the one delaying the flight, Nia said quietly. Don't speak to me, Beatrice screamed. You don't get to speak to me. The cockpit door opened. Captain Miller, a tall man with silver hair and 4 stripes on his shoulders, stepped out. He looked tired. He assessed the situation quickly. The red-faced woman in 2A, the young black girl standing stoically in the aisle, the distressed flight attendant. What seems to be the trouble? Captain Miller asked, his voice a calming baritone. Captain, Beatrice said, her tone instantly changing to a manipulative sweetness. This stewardess is incompetent, and this passenger is harassing me. I'm simply trying to sit in my usual seat, and they are trying to force me to move to the back for her. Captain Miller looked at Sarah. Sarah shook her head and handed him the manifest. Ms. Callaway is assigned to 4B. Miss James is in 2A. Ms. Callaway is refusing to move and is using abusive, discriminatory language. Captain Miller looked at Beatrice. Ma'am, the manifest is a federal record. You have to sit in your assigned seat. If you don't move, we can't push back. Then we don't push back. Beatrice crossed her arms. I am Beatrice Callaway. I demand you upgrade me to this seat immediately and downgrade her. It's a simple fix. Do it. Captain Miller sighed. I can't do that. That's not how it works. Make it work, Beatrice shrieked, or I will call your CEO right now. I have connections. Nia, who had been silent for the last 5 minutes, suddenly reached into her pocket. You don't need to call the CEO, Nia said. Her voice was steady now, cold. I can do it for you. Beatrice stared at her. What? You said you have connections, Nia said, unlocking her phone. You said you work for Callaway and Finch Logistics. My husband owns the company, Beatrice sneered. Not that it's any of your business. And you ship with this airline, Nia continued, which means you're a vendor. I am a priority partner. Right, Nia said. She scrolled through her contacts. She didn't stop at Mom or Dad. She scrolled past names of college friends. She stopped at a contact simply labeled Mr. Sterling. Reginald Sterling, the owner of Sterling Global, the parent company that owned not just the airline, but also held the exclusive logistics contract that kept Beatrice's husband's company alive. Callaway and Finch was a subcontractor for Sterling, and Reginald Sterling was also the man who had personally handed Nia her scholarship 3 years ago, the man who had told her, if anyone ever tries to stop you from getting where you need to go, you call me. Nia hit the call button. She put it on speaker. The phone rang once, twice. The entire cabin was silent. Beatrice rolled her eyes. Who are you calling? Your mother? The NAACP? Then the ringing stopped. A voice boomed through the quiet first-class cabin. It wasn't a secretary. It was the man himself. Nia? Everything okay? You should be in the air by now. Nia held the phone up. Hi, Mr. Sterling. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm on the plane, flight 402, but I can't sit down. Why not? Reginald Sterling's voice sharpened. Is there a maintenance issue? No, sir, Nia said. looking dead in Beatrice's eyes. "There's a woman in my seat. She refuses to move. She says she's Beatrice Callaway from Callaway and Finch, and she says people like me don't belong in first class." There was a pause on the other end of the line. A long, terrifying pause. Beatrice's face faltered. She recognized the name. Everyone in her industry knew the name Sterling, but she didn't believe it. She couldn't believe it. "Callaway and Finch?" Mr. Sterling asked. His voice was no longer warm. It was like granite. "Put her on. Or better yet, is Captain Miller there?" Captain Miller's eyes widened. He recognized the voice immediately. He stepped forward. "Mr. Sterling, this is Captain Miller." "Captain!" Sterling barked. "Why is my scholarship recipient standing in the aisle while a subcontractor insults her?" "Sir, we are trying to remove the passenger, but she is refusing to comply," the captain stammered. "Refusing to comply?" Sterling let out a dark chuckle. "Okay. Nia, hold on 1 second." The line didn't go dead, but the sound of typing could be heard in the background. Furious typing. "You're faking it," Beatrice whispered, though her hands had started to tremble. "That's a recording. You're bluffing." "I don't bluff," Nia said. Suddenly, Beatrice's phone, sitting on the armrest, lit up. Then the captain's iPad pinged. Then the gate agent's computer outside the plane beeped loudly enough to be heard through the open door. A collective digital shudder seemed to run through the aircraft. "Captain Miller," Sterling's voice came back. "I've just issued a grounded order for Flight 402. Nobody moves. I am also freezing the gate." "Sir?" Captain Miller asked. "The plane doesn't leave until that woman is off," Sterling commanded. "And Beatrice?" Beatrice flinched. "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "This is the man who just cancelled your husband's contract," Sterling said. "Effective immediately. I'm looking at your vendor profile right now. Callaway and Finch, terminated, for breach of conduct and violation of our anti-discrimination clause. You just cost your family business $40 million, Mrs. Callaway." Beatrice's mouth fell open. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a corpse. "And Nia?" Sterling added. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. Hand the phone to the police when they get there. I've called the airport authority. They're on their way." The silence in the first-class cabin of Flight 402 was heavier than the plane itself. The voice of Mr. Sterling had cut through the air like a guillotine, severing Beatrice Callaway's reality from the delusion she had been living in. The phone in Nia's hand was still connected, the call time ticking upward, recording every second of Beatrice's undoing. Beatrice sat frozen in seat 2A. Her face, previously flushed with rage, was now a mask of fractured porcelain. She stared at the phone, then at Nia, then at the captain. Her mind scrambled for a foothold, a way to spin this back into a narrative where she was the victim, or at least the victor. That wasn't him," Beatrice stammered, her voice brittle. She looked around the cabin, seeking allies, but found only disgust. The businessman in 1BO was no longer hiding his phone. He was filming openly, holding the device steady to capture her humiliation in 4K resolution. "It's a trick. You used an AI voice changer. I've seen them on the news. You're trying to scare me." Captain Miller stepped closer, his posture rigid. "Ma'am, I assure you, Reginald Sterling is not a man who participates in pranks, and neither is the Port Authority." As if on cue, the heavy thud of boots echoed from the jet bridge. The passengers in economy, who had been murmuring and standing up to crane their necks, fell silent. 2 police officers boarded the plane. They weren't the friendly airport security who checked for water bottles. These were Chicago police officers assigned to the airport detail, and they looked ready for a fight. One was a tall, broad-shouldered sergeant named O'Malley. The other was a younger officer, Davis. They walked onto the plane with the distinct air of people who had interrupted their lunch break for something serious. "Who is the problem here?" Sergeant O'Malley asked, his voice booming without the need for a microphone. Captain Miller pointed directly at seat 2A. "Ms. Beatrice Callaway. She is trespassing in a seat not assigned to her. She has delayed a federal flight, and she has engaged in disorderly conduct involving racial harassment." Beatrice scrambled to stand up, spilling the remnants of her mimosa onto her cream cashmere sweater. The orange stain spread like a wound, ruining the fabric instantly. "Officers, thank God!" Beatrice cried out, trying to push past Nia to get to them. "I am the victim here. These people, this pilot and this girl, they are conspiring against me. They are trying to steal my seat. I want to press charges for harassment and distress." Sergeant O'Malley didn't blink. He looked at the manifest Sarah, the flight attendant, handed him. He looked at Beatrice's boarding pass, which was lying on the armrest where she had slammed it. "Ma'am, your ticket says 4B, O'Malley said flatly. "You are in 2A. "It's a computer error," Beatrice shrieked. "Don't you know who I am? My husband is Richard Callaway. We own this city. If you touch me, I will have your badges." The threat hung in the air, pathetic and hollow. "Ma'am," Officer Davis stepped in, reaching for the handcuffs on his belt. "We have a direct order from the airport authority to remove you. The gate has been frozen. The tarmac is locked down. You have caused a Tier 1 security disruption." I did what?" Beatrice blinked. "Disrupting the operation of a commercial flight is a federal offense," O'Malley said. "Now you can walk off this plane on your own 2 feet, or we can drag you. But either way, you are leaving seat 2A. Beatrice looked at Nia. For the first time, she truly saw her. She saw the calm strength in the young girl's eyes. Nia hadn't screamed. She hadn't fought. She had simply made a call. "You ruined everything," Beatrice hissed at Nia, her voice dripping with venomous hate. "You little witch. You think you've won? Wait until my lawyers get hold of you. You'll never fly again. I'll make sure you lose that scholarship. I'll make sure you're expelled." Nia finally spoke. She held the phone up again. "Mr. Sterling, are you still there?" "I'm here, Nia." Sterling's voice came through, loud enough for the officers to hear. "Officer, this is Reginald Sterling. Please ensure that woman is removed immediately, and add a charge of making threats against a minor to the list. My legal team is already filing the paperwork." Sergeant O'Malley's eyebrows shot up. He recognized the name. Everyone in Chicago recognized the name. "Yes, Mr. Sterling, we're on it." O'Malley moved fast. He grabbed Beatrice's wrist. She screamed, a high, piercing sound that made everyone wince. "Get your hands off me! Assault! Police brutality!" She flailed, her manicured nails raking against the officer's arm. That was the final nail in her coffin. "That's assault on an officer," O'Malley grunted, spinning her around and slamming her chest against the bulkhead wall. Click, click. The sound of handcuffs tightening was the most satisfying sound the passengers of Flight 402 had ever heard. "You are under arrest," Officer Davis recited, grabbing her other arm. "You have the right to remain silent. We strongly suggest you use it." They began to march her down the aisle, but it wasn't a quick exit. Because the plane was full, Beatrice had to be walked past the entire first-class cabin, then past the galley and out the door. As she was shoved forward, the businessman in 1B stood up. "Hey, lady!" he shouted. Beatrice looked up, mascara running down her face, hair disheveled. "Smile for YouTube," he mocked. "Rot in hell," Beatrice screamed back, spitting in his direction. The officers tightened their grip, forcing her head down as they shoved her onto the jet bridge. Her screams echoed down the metal tunnel, insults, threats, names of politicians she claimed to know, demands for her phone. Inside the cabin, the silence returned. But it was different now. It was the silence of relief. Captain Miller picked up the PA microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. We have removed the security threat. We will be pushing back in 5 minutes." A cheer erupted from the economy section. People clapped. Nia stood there, shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. Sarah, the flight attendant, gently touched her shoulder. "Miss James," Sarah said softly, "Seat 2A is ready for you. Let me get you a fresh blanket, and anything you want from the menu is on the house." Nia looked at the seat. The leather was slightly wrinkled where Beatrice had been. The mimosa stain was on the floor. "Thank you," Nia whispered. She sat down. It was comfortable. It was spacious. But as she buckled her seatbelt, she didn't feel triumphant. She felt heavy. She knew that while the flight was over for Beatrice, the war had just begun. She looked at her phone. The call had ended, but a text message from Mr. Sterling had just come through. "Enjoy the flight, Nia. Do not worry about the woman. Focus on your speech for the gala. I will handle the rest. Justice is a dish best served publicly." As the plane taxied toward the runway, Nia looked out the window. She saw a police cruiser on the tarmac, lights flashing. In the back seat, she could just make out the silhouette of a woman with blonde hair thrashing against the cage. Nia put on her headphones, selected a playlist, and closed her eyes. She was going to Atlanta. Beatrice Callaway was going to jail. The holding cell at O'Hare International Airport was a stark contrast to the first-class cabin Beatrice Callaway believed was her birthright. It was a 10-by-10 room with cinder-block walls painted a depressing shade of institutional beige. There were no leather seats, no mimosas, and certainly no legroom. There was only a metal bench bolted to the floor and a toilet in the corner that smelled of industrial cleaner and despair. Beatrice had been there for 3 hours. They had taken her phone. They had taken her purse. They had even taken her shoelaces. She sat on the metal bench, shivering in her stained cashmere sweater. The air conditioning was cranked up to a freezing temperature, a tactic she was sure they were using just to torture her. She had stopped screaming an hour ago. Her throat was raw. Now, she was just seething. She paced the small cell, her mind running in circles. "They can't do this. I am Beatrice Callaway. Richard will fix this. Richard always fixes this." She had used her one phone call to call Richard's private cell. He hadn't answered. She had left a frantic, screaming voicemail. "Richard, pick up. They've arrested me. Some little brat stole my seat. And Sterling, that bastard Sterling, he's involved. Get the lawyers. Get down here now." She checked the analog clock on the wall outside the bars. Why wasn't he here? He should have been here with a team of attorneys by now, threatening to sue the police department into oblivion. Finally, the heavy metal door at the end of the hallway buzzed and clanked open. Beatrice leaped to the bars, gripping the cold steel. "Richard!" It wasn't Richard. It was Sergeant O'Malley, holding a clipboard. But behind him, walking with a slow, defeated gait, was a man in a rumpled charcoal suit. It was Richard Callaway, but he didn't look like the titan of industry Beatrice was used to seeing. Usually, Richard was immaculate, tie perfectly knotted, posture commanding. Today, he looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 hours. His tie was loose, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was carrying a briefcase that looked heavy in his hand. "Richard!" Beatrice cried out, relief flooding her chest. "Oh, thank God! Get me out of here! Tell these idiots who we are! Did you bring the lawyer? I want to sue the airline, the girl, the pilot, everyone!" Richard stopped 5 feet from the cell door. He didn't come closer to hold her hand through the bars. He didn't look angry at the police. He looked at Beatrice with an expression she had never seen before, pure, unadulterated loathing. "Richard," Beatrice faltered, "why are you looking at me like that? I'm the victim." "The victim," Richard repeated. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "You think you're the victim. They dragged me off the plane. That girl? She knew Reginald Sterling. Can you believe it? She called him and he threatened to cancel the contract." "You need to call him, Richard. Smooth it over. Tell him it was a misunderstanding." Richard let out a laugh. It was a terrifying, dry sound. "Smooth it over?" Richard shook his head. "Beatrice, there is nothing to smooth over. The contract isn't threatened. It's gone." "What?" "I was in a board meeting when my phone started blowing up," Richard said, his voice rising slightly. "Not from you, from my CFO, from the VP of Operations, from Sterling Global's legal department." He took a step closer to the bars, his eyes narrowing. "At 2:15 p.m., Reginald Sterling enacted the Morality and Conduct Clause of our vendor agreement. He terminated the logistics partnership, effective immediately. So, we'll find other clients," Beatrice scoffed, though her stomach twisted. "Other clients?" Richard shouted, his composure cracking. "Callaway and Finch is a dedicated vendor. Sterling was 85% of our revenue. 85%, Beatrice. Without that contract, we can't make payroll next week. We can't pay the lease on the warehouse. We are insolvent." Beatrice gripped the bars tighter. "You're exaggerating. You always exaggerate." "I am not exaggerating," Richard roared, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. "The news hit the Bloomberg terminal 30 minutes ago. Callaway and Finch dropped by Sterling Global following racial abuse incident involving executive's wife. Our stock, it didn't just dip, it crashed. It's trading at pennies. The board held an emergency vote while I was driving here." Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. "The board?" "They fired me, Beatrice," Richard whispered. "They voted to remove me as CEO to try and salvage the company's reputation. They think if they get rid of the Callaway name, maybe Sterling will take them back. So I'm out. I'm done. My grandfather started that company, and you destroyed it in 10 minutes because you were too proud to sit in 4B. Beatrice slumped against the bars. I didn't know." "You never know," Richard spat. "You never think. You walk around like the world owes you everything, treating people like garbage. I told you to stop. I told you your attitude was going to cost us one day, but I didn't think it would cost us everything." "We still have our money," Beatrice pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "We have the house, the accounts." Richard placed the briefcase on the floor. He opened it. He didn't pull out bail papers. He pulled out a thick manila envelope. "That's the other thing," Richard said, closing the briefcase. "Sterling is suing us personally for damages to his brand. He's freezing our assets pending litigation. He has better lawyers than God, Beatrice. He's going to bleed us dry." He slid the envelope through the bars. It landed on the dirty concrete floor with a slap. "What is this?" Beatrice asked, trembling. "I'm not going down with you," Richard said, buttoning his jacket. He looked at her with cold finality. "Those are divorce papers. My lawyer drafted them on the way here. I'm filing for separation, based on irreconcilable differences and gross misconduct." "Richard, no, you can't leave me here. I'm in jail." "I posted your bail," Richard said, turning his back on her. "It was the last check I could write before the accounts froze. You'll be released in an hour. Figure out your own ride home. The driver isn't coming. And don't come to the house. I've had the locks changed." "Richard!" Beatrice screamed, reaching through the bars. "Richard, please! I love you!" Richard paused at the heavy metal door. He didn't turn around. You don't love anyone but yourself, Beatrice. And now, that's all you have left. The door clanged shut behind him. Beatrice was alone. The silence of the holding cell was deafening. She looked down at the envelope on the floor. Divorce, bankruptcy, public humiliation. She slid down the wall until she hit the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. She had wanted to be treated like a VIP. She had wanted everyone to know her name. Now they did. But the story wasn't over. While Beatrice's world was collapsing in a Chicago holding cell, Naya landed in Atlanta. And as she walked off the plane, she found that Mr. Sterling hadn't just prepared a ride for her. He had prepared a welcome committee that would turn this private incident into a national movement. Beatrice thought the worst had happened. She was wrong. The internet had just woken up. While Beatrice was shivering on the floor of a holding cell in Chicago, Nia James was stepping off the jet bridge in Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. But she wasn't walking into anonymity. As she entered the terminal, she saw them, a wall of cameras. Nia froze. Had she done something wrong? Had Mr. Sterling been angry? But then she saw the signs held by a crowd of people who had gathered near the gate. We stand with Naya. Seat 2A belongs to Queens. Justice for Flight 402. Nia blinked, overwhelmed. A tall, impeccably dressed woman in a navy suit stepped forward, flanking her immediately. It was Mr. Sterling's head of public relations, a sharp woman named Vanessa. Keep walking, Naya, Vanessa said gently but firmly, guiding her through the throng. Don't stop. Just smile and wave. Mr. Sterling is waiting in the car. How do they know? Nia whispered, clutching her backpack. I haven't told anyone. Vanessa held up her tablet. You didn't have to. The man in seat 1B? He live-streamed the entire interaction on TikTok. It's been viewed 40 million times in the last 3 hours. It's trending #1 globally. Seat 2A is the top hashtag in the world right now. Nia's jaw dropped. She wasn't just a student anymore. She was a symbol. They made it to the waiting black SUV on the tarmac, a private exit arranged to avoid the paparazzi swarming the baggage claim. Inside, the leather seats were soft, and the air smelled of expensive cologne. Reginald Sterling sat there, looking exactly as he did on TV, formidable, stern, but currently looking at Nia with fatherly pride. I'm sorry for the trouble, sir, Nia said immediately. Trouble? Sterling chuckled, handing her a bottle of water. Nia, you didn't cause trouble. You exposed a rot that needed to be cut out. Do you know how long I've been looking for a reason to sever ties with Callaway and Finch? Their numbers were slipping, but Richard Callaway was a friend of my father. I needed cause. You gave me cause. The car sped toward the hotel where the Sterling Foundation Gala was being held. Tonight, Sterling said, his tone turning serious. You were scheduled to give a 3-minute speech about your studies in architecture. We are scrapping that. Nia panicked, but I memorized it. People don't want to hear about architecture tonight, Sterling said. The world is watching. Every major news network is broadcasting the gala live because they know you're there. Tonight, you talk about dignity. You talk about what it feels like to be told you don't belong, and what it feels like to claim your space. Can you do that? Nia looked at her hands. She thought about Beatrice's sneer. She thought about the service class comment. She thought about the years of being overlooked. Yes, Nia said. I can do that. 3 hours later, Nia stood backstage at the St. Regis Atlanta. She was wearing a gown provided by the foundation, an emerald green silk dress that made her look like royalty. And now, the announcer's voice boomed, Please welcome our scholarship recipient and the young woman who taught the world a lesson in courage today. Nia James. The applause was deafening. It wasn't polite golf claps. It was a roar. People stood up. CEOs, celebrities, politicians, they were all on their feet. Nia walked to the podium. The lights were blinding. She took a breath. Today, Nia started, her voice shaking slightly before finding its rhythm. I was told to move to the back. I was told that my ticket didn't matter because of what I looked like. I was told that excellence has a specific face, and it wasn't mine. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. But I realized something at 30,000 feet, she continued, looking directly into the camera lens that was beaming her face to millions of screens, including the TV in the break room of the Chicago Police Department. Dignity isn't something you ask for. It's not something you wait for someone to give you. It's something you carry. And no matter how much money someone has, no matter what seat they think they own, they cannot buy class, and they cannot buy character. She paused. To Mrs. Callaway, Nia said, naming her publicly for the first time, I hope you find peace, because I have found my seat, and I'm not moving. The ovation lasted for 5 minutes. By the time Nia left the stage, her life had changed. Her tuition was fully paid by donors who had called in during the speech. A publishing house had already emailed Vanessa offering a book deal, but while Nia was ascending, Beatrice was crashing, hard. Chicago at night is unforgiving, especially when the wind whips off the lake, cutting through clothing like a knife. Beatrice Callaway stood on the sidewalk outside the police station. It was 11:10 p.m. She had been released 20 minutes ago, clutching a plastic bag containing her personal effects. Her phone, dead battery, her wallet, empty of cash, and her lipstick. She was still wearing the cream cashmere sweater, but it was now stained with mimosa, sweat, and the grime of the holding cell floor. She looked like a ghost of her former self. "Taxi!" she screamed, waving her hand frantically at a yellow cab passing by. The cab slowed down. The driver peered out the window. He looked at her disheveled hair, the wild look in her eyes, and the stained clothes. Then he looked closer. "Hey," the driver shouted. "You're the plane lady. I saw you on Twitter." Beatrice straightened up, trying to summon her old arrogance. "Yes, I am Beatrice Callaway. Take me to 400 North Lake Shore Drive. I will pay you double once we get there." The driver laughed. "Lady, I wouldn't take you for $1,000. My sister works for that airline. You're banned from my cab. Walk." He spat on the curb near her expensive loafers and sped off. Beatrice stood there, stunned. Banned from a taxi? She tried to turn on her phone. It flashed the low battery symbol and died. She rummaged through her wallet for her credit cards. She had her black Amex. Richard said the assets were frozen, but surely the credit cards still worked. They had a limit of $500,000. She walked to the nearest ATM, a sketchy machine inside a 24-hour convenience store. The clerk, a teenager with headphones, barely looked up. Beatrice inserted the card. Processing. Declined. Contact issuer. She tried her Visa. Declined. She tried her debit card. Card retained. Account locked. The machine swallowed her card. "No!" Beatrice shrieked, slapping the screen. "Give it back, you stupid machine!" "Hey!" the clerk shouted. "You break it, you buy it. Get out of here before I call the cops." "Do you know who I am?" Beatrice turned on him, her eyes manic. The kid looked at her. He pulled up his phone and showed her the screen. It was a meme, a picture of Beatrice's face twisted in rage on the plane, with the caption, "The face of unemployment." "Yeah, I know who you are," the kid smirked. "You're the meme. Get out." Beatrice fled the store. She had no money, no phone, no ride. It was a 5-mile walk to her penthouse on Lakeshore Drive. She started walking. Her feet, used to cushioned insoles and car services, began to blister after the first mile. The wind bit into her skin. She was hungry. She hadn't eaten since the mimosa on the plane. By the time she reached her building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel, it was 1:00 a.m. She stumbled into the lobby, relieved. She was home. The doorman, Henry, would let her in. Henry had worked there for 10 years. She had never tipped him, and she rarely learned his last name. But he knew her. She pushed through the revolving doors. "Henry," she gasped, leaning against the marble desk. "Oh, thank God. Let me up. I lost my keys." Henry, a burly man in a uniform, didn't move to open the elevator. He stood in front of it, arms crossed. "Mrs. Callaway," Henry said. His voice wasn't warm. It was professional, cold steel. "Henry, open the elevator. I need a bath and a drink." "I can't do that, ma'am," Henry said. "Mr. Callaway called the building management 3 hours ago. You have been removed from the lease. He has sole possession of the unit pending the divorce proceedings. There is a restraining order on file preventing you from entering the premises." Beatrice felt the room spin. "This is my house. My clothes are up there. My jewelry." "Mr. Callaway has packed a bag for you," Henry said. He reached behind the desk and pulled out a small gym bag. He dropped it on the floor. He said, "This is all you're allowed to take." Beatrice unzipped it frantically. Inside were sweatpants, a pair of sneakers and a winter coat. No diamonds. No designer bags. No checkbook. "This is a joke," Beatrice whispered. "Where am I supposed to go?" Henry looked at her. For a second, Beatrice thought she saw pity. But then she remembered the Christmas she had yelled at him for letting a delivery driver use the main entrance. She remembered calling him slow because he held the door open too long in the winter. "I don't know, ma'am," Henry said, "but you can't stay here. We have a strict policy against loitering in the lobby. It upsets the residents." "I am a resident," she screamed. "Not anymore," Henry said. He stepped forward, looming over her. "Please leave, or I will have to call the police. And I think you've seen enough of them today." Beatrice grabbed the gym bag and ran out. She walked to the park bench across the street. She sat down, pulling the cheap winter coat around her. She looked up at the penthouse window. Her window. The lights were off. She was sitting on a park bench, looking at a life she had torched with a single sentence. A group of teenagers walked by. They stopped. One of them pointed. "Whoa, is that her? The plane lady?" "No way," another said. "She looks like a homeless person." "Wait, let me get a selfie." They ran over, phones flashing in the dark, blinding her. "Leave me alone," Beatrice cried, covering her face. "Say the line," one of them laughed. "Say, 'Do you know who I am?'" Beatrice curled into a ball on the bench, sobbing. The reality hit her harder than the cold. She was viral. She was famous. But she was destitute. As the teenagers got bored and walked away, a woman approached the bench. She was pushing a shopping cart filled with cans. She looked to be about Beatrice's age, but weathered by years on the street. The woman stopped and looked at Beatrice. She saw the expensive, ruined sweater. She saw the weeping. "Rough night?" the woman asked, her voice raspy. Beatrice looked up, her makeup smeared, her eyes hollow. "You have no idea." The woman reached into a cart and pulled out a half-eaten sandwich wrapped in foil. "Here, you look like you need it more than me." Beatrice stared at the sandwich. Yesterday, she would have called the police on this woman for existing in her line of sight. Yesterday, she had refused to sit near a scholarship student. Today, she was accepting charity from a woman who lived in a park. Beatrice took the sandwich with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't get used to it," the woman said, pushing her cart forward. "Winter's coming, and the concrete doesn't care who your husband used to be." Beatrice took a bite of the stale bread. It was the best thing she had ever tasted. And as she chewed, staring at the dark waters of Lake Michigan, she finally realized the truth. She had fought so hard to keep her seat in first class, but in the game of life, she had just been downgraded to cargo. 6 months later, O'Hare International Airport was bustling with the usual holiday rush. Snow flurries danced outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of Terminal 3, but inside, the air was warm and smelled of cinnamon pretzels. Nia James walked through the terminal, her heels clicking confidently on the terrazzo floor. She looked different now. The oversized hoodie was gone, replaced by a tailored blazer and professional slacks. She carried a sleek leather portfolio tucked under her arm, a gift from the architectural firm where she was now a junior associate. She wasn't just traveling for a gala this time. She was traveling for work. Sterling Global had commissioned her firm to redesign the lounge interiors for their partner airlines, and Nia was the lead on the project. She approached the security checkpoint. The line for general boarding was long, winding back toward the entrance doors. But Nia didn't stop there. She walked straight to the priority access lane. She scanned her digital boarding pass. The machine beeped a cheerful green. First class. As she gathered her belongings from the conveyor belt, she noticed a commotion near the trash cans by the wall. A woman in a grey maintenance uniform was struggling with an overflowing garbage bag. The bag had snagged on the metal rim, ripping open and spilling coffee cups and half-eaten bagels onto the pristine floor. "Hey, watch it!" a businessman in a suit yelled, stepping around the mess. "You almost got coffee on my shoes. Can't you do anything right?" The woman in the uniform flinched, keeping her head low. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll clean it up. Right away." Her voice was raspy, broken. She fell to her knees, frantically gathering the trash with bare hands, trying to clear the path for the busy travelers. Nia paused. There was something hauntingly familiar about the frantic, desperate way the woman scrubbed at the floor. She took a step closer, peering over her sunglasses. The woman looked up, wiping a stray lock of stringy, graying blonde hair from her forehead. Her face was gaunt, lines of stress etched deep around her mouth. She looked 20 years older than she had 6 months ago. It was Beatrice Callaway, the former socialite, the woman who had claimed she owned the sky, was now scrubbing the floor of the very airport she used to terrorize. Their eyes met. For a second, the noise of the terminal seemed to fade. Beatrice froze, a soggy coffee cup in her hand. She recognized Nia instantly. How could she not? Nia's face had been on the cover of Time magazine's Voices of Change issue. Nia was the symbol of everything Beatrice had lost. Beatrice's lips parted as if to speak, to beg, to apologize, to scream. But Nia didn't give her the chance. She didn't sneer. She didn't pull out her phone to record. She didn't say a word. Nia simply adjusted her portfolio, turned her head, and kept walking. To Nia, Beatrice Callaway was no longer a villain. She was no longer a threat. She was exactly what Beatrice had feared becoming the most: irrelevant, invisible. Beatrice watched her go. She watched Nia walk toward the first-class lounge, the glass doors sliding open to welcome her into a world of comfort and respect. "Hey, janitor!" a supervisor shouted from down the hall. "Stop staring at the passengers and clean up that mess, or you're fired!" Beatrice flinched. "Yes, sir." "Coming, sir." She looked back at the glass doors one last time. But Nia was gone. Beatrice looked down at the floor, at the spilled coffee and the dirty napkins. She picked up her rag and started scrubbing. She had refused to move for a black girl. Now, the whole world had moved on without her. And that, my friends, is the story of Flight 402. Beatrice Callaway thought her money and her status gave her the right to treat people like dirt. She thought she could crush Nia James just because she felt like it. But she forgot the most important rule of travel and of life. Turbulence hits when you least expect it. Nia James didn't just keep her seat. She soared. She proved that dignity isn't about where you sit. It's about how you stand. And Beatrice? She learned that when you try to ground someone else, you're usually the one who ends up crashing. It's a brutal reminder that karma has no deadline, and it certainly doesn't fly economy. So, what would you have done if you were in Nia's shoes? Would you have kept your cool, or would you have snapped? And do you think Beatrice's punishment fit the crime, or was it too harsh? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get a real conversation going. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more dramatic tales of instant karma and justice served, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for listening, and remember, be kind. You never know who you're sitting next to. See you in the next video.